of our guests on the show yesterday, suggested the solution lies with white people. Can white...
We need to change the dialogue and change the question to, you should have a group of white people on the TV to talk about what does it mean to be white? What does racism mean to white people? Because it's the impact that I'm having, not the core. I'm not the cause.
So that was Gamal G. Turawa. So we're asking, can white people recognise the racism in themselves? We're joined by a panel of experts. Matthew Collins is a former member of the BNP who has become an anti-racism campaigner. Civil rights activist Peter Tatchell joins us from central London. Kehinde Andrews is a professor of Black Studies at Birmingham University who joins us now, along with YouTuber Suzy Mills, who attended yesterday's protest in London. Very good morning to you all. Well, Matthew Collins, I wonder if I can start with you. You were racist. I mean, how did you change? And have you?
Well, yes, I have, and not overnight. My racism was not the unwitting racism that we see. Mine was quite learned and profound and deliberate, and I addressed that, most importantly and immediately. I addressed the things that I said and did deliberately to cause offence and tear at people's dignity. But to understand racism and how it works and how actions and words that people use affect others takes a long time. It takes a real long time, and it takes empathy. And I agree with what the person said yesterday. First and foremost, people have to understand the effects that racism has on other people, how it tears at their dignity and the way they feel about themselves. And a lot of white people do have to address the language that they use unwittingly. I think a lot of racism that we see and we witness and that offends people isn't deliberate, isn't planned. And so we have to address the way that we speak and the way that we think, and also take into consideration other people's feelings and where they come from and how they arrive at a place where they can suffer abuse and they can suffer from violence and they can suffer from discrimination. And it's a question about making people aware of the effects of racism. Mine was profound, it was deliberate, but after that, I had to address the other things I was completely unaware of. Most racism that we see is a direct result of people's ignorance of their actions.
OK, let's bring in Suzy Mills. You were at the protest yesterday in Hyde Park. I mean, it was a remarkable scene. It was broadly peaceful. There were a few ugly flashpoints at Downing Street and other places, but fortunately it didn't escalate. I've got two questions, I think. My first one is just an observation. There seemed to be very little social distancing going on there. Were you aware that people were just ignoring that? What do you feel about that? And on the wider point, you've just heard somebody there who was racist talking about how he came to realise this was not the right path. What do you think of that?
Well, firstly, unfortunately, Piers, we as Black people can't decide when another Black person is going to be brutally murdered by law enforcement or police officers. So we had to make that decision collectively and globally and stand in solidarity with what is happening in America to take that action. I mean, some people 2 weeks ago thought risking their lives to go to the beach was worthwhile, and we believe that, we had to go and stand in solidarity. It's not our fault. It's nothing to do with us that somebody has been killed. And this is what we felt we had to do. And just going on the back of it, I do agree that a lot of white people do not even realise when they are being racist. A lot of white people assume that racism is just hate. It's an act of hate. But there's other things as well. There's the fact that there's white privilege. There's the fact that they have access. There's the fact that they are ignorant to a lot of things as well. There's a fact that there's empathy. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of things that white people are very good at understanding overt racism, which they've seen, and they can empathize. And it's so sad that another Black man has been killed, but they do not understand the subtle racism that Black people experience every single day in our lives. And that is what we need to address. That's what white people need to learn to understand. That's what, and I think that it's telling when Black people come forward and we speak of our experience and we are accused of using the race card. And that lets me know that that's something that this is racism, subtle racism is something that is not just going to go away.
Yeah. Peter Tatchell, you are a human rights campaigner. I mean, that phrase, white privilege, is something that I think we all have to address and understand, because white people benefit from it. But I think for white people, it's hard to realise that fact sometimes.
Well, you're absolutely right. I'm very conscious that as a white person, I do have privileges because I live in a society which is structurally, institutionally racist, that it disadvantages black and ethnic minority people. And even though I may not wish to benefit, I do. I have to acknowledge that. I think also I want to echo what previous people have said, that racism is a white people's problem and white people have a responsibility to solve it. And that means educating ourselves about the black experience, learning about the many injustices that black people face, but also looking into our own lives, our own behavior, the words and language we use, how we interact with black and ethnic minority people, to check ourselves about our privilege, to check about subtle, insidious, perhaps even unintended racism.
On that point, Peter, I raised a question earlier, which was, I guess on some level quite an inflammatory observation, but I thought it was worth saying that the blanket coverage today of this Madeleine McCann development in all the papers, some papers doing 10 pages before they get to any reference to the Hyde Park protests yesterday, for example, it seemed to me an example, actually, of unwitting, subliminal decision-making, which I do not think that decision would have been taken if Madeleine McCann had been a black girl. I just don't. I don't think it would have galvanised the same attention or attracted the same media attention in such a huge amount so many years after her disappearance. That's the kind of thing where if I was black, I would look at that and go, why is it one rule for white girls that go missing and another for little black girls who do go missing and don't get this kind of attention?
Well, I think you've hit it on the head. I think there is a double standard. And I think you're right that if this had been a young black girl, I don't think there would have been the same level of attention. And the same goes with the coverage about the killings of unarmed black people in the United States by police. That has been good and positive in many ways. But it's interesting that the killing of black people here in Britain by police, of which there are dozens, Sean Rigg, Roger Sylvester, Joy Gardner, I could go on with a huge list, that has not received the same attention in the British media. And the families of those black victims have been struggling for years to get justice, and still to this day, most of them haven't. So there's another example of how institutional racism, both in terms of media coverage of these police killings here in Britain, and also, as well, the lack of proper media coverage is an example of institutional structural racism.
Professor Kahindi Andrews, you've spoken some uncomfortable truths to us before on this programme. What do you think that the killing of George Floyd in America should make us want to change?
I mean, it's interesting because we're having all this, as you started by saying that everybody's united in their condemnation. And the problem is that this is how we deal with racism. You see something which is so terrible, everybody condemns it and everybody comes out, but that's easy to do. This is an easy situation because it's so bad. I mean, you can even have Matt Hancock on the TV saying Black Lives Matter while they're paying lip service to their BAME inequality and COVID deaths. Or Boris Johnson say, well, let's see, racism's terrible, when he presides over one of the most racist governments in recent history. And so there's a shallowness about this moment. And we have to start connecting. This killing is not just about America. It is about here. It's about inequality. It's about health inequality. It's about structural issues in society. Unfortunately, we're still having a really shallow, tokenistic conversation about this issue. And I'm not sure we're ever going to get past that, if I'm honest.
So, OK, so you say it's a shallow conversation. So give us some depth on it, that, what should we be doing?
I mean, it's interesting because I think part of my argument here would be the premise is that, and I've been here, like I said, we've had these conversations. And
yes.
I'm not sure that we can have that. Whiteness is more like a psychosis. You can't have this real, meaningful conversation. And one of the things
but when you say that, Professor Andrews, does that mean that there is no capacity to change? Because there has to be.
No, I mean, what gives me hope, and when I see people out on the street and I see people protesting, and the solution here isn't going to be well-meaning white people all getting on the same page. That's not going to happen. The solution is going to be when we understand that we can't wait for you to get it and to come on board and get educated. We have to do what we're going to do. I mean, 60 years ago, Malcolm X made the declaration. It's the ballot or the bullet. Like, give us equality or we will take it. Get on the bus or get out of the way. But we cannot be waiting for white people to be educated because we'll be waiting forever.